What if losing your most valuable possession actually made you richer and more powerful? It sounds crazy, right? But in the late 18th century, that's pretty much what happened to the British Empire. When it lost America, it didn't just collapse. Nope, it pivoted. And in doing so, it found a new prize that would redefine its power for the next century and a half.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the massive crisis Britain was in after losing its American colonies. Then, we'll see how this quiet trading operation in the East suddenly became the new focus, and how it morphed from simple trade to straight-up territory. We're going to compare the old way of doing things with the new model for empire, see how Britain eventually took direct control, and finally, really dig into why India became known as the jewel in the crown. So, let's set the scene. The year is 1783, and the British Empire is facing a huge, almost unthinkable setback.
You have to understand, the loss of the 13 colonies was a staggering blow. These weren't just some random territories. They were a cornerstone of Britain's whole imperial system. They brought in immense wealth from raw materials and trade, and they gave Britain a powerful strategic foothold in North America. Losing them meant losing money, influence, and a huge part of its global identity. It was a disaster. But here's what's really important for our story. Why did they lose them? Well, it turns out the whole American model of settler colonialism had some serious flaws. The colonies had their own powerful local governments, and over time, they developed their own sense of identity, completely separate from Britain. And of course, the Atlantic Ocean is huge. Trying to control things from thousands of miles away was incredibly difficult. Communication was painfully slow, and getting troops there in time was a nightmare. Britain desperately needed a new way of doing things, and it was about to find one, in a place it probably wasn't expecting. So with America gone, where does Britain look next? Well, it just so happened they already had a presence on the other side of the world, one that had been quietly growing for more than 100 years.
And this is where we meet the East India Company. Now, it's super important to get this straight. This was not a government body. It was a private trading company, founded way back in 1600. And its goal was simple: make money by trading in popular Asian goods like spices, silk, and cotton. That's it.
And this wasn't some kind of overnight invasion. The company's presence grew really slowly, over more than a century, as it set up these key trading posts along the Indian coastline. In these early years, the East India Company was just a guest. It operated with the permission of local Indian rulers. It was a trader, not a ruler. But that peaceful, business-as-usual arrangement, it wasn't going to last. A huge shift was on the horizon, and the company's role was about to change dramatically. It was moving from commerce to conquest. So what was the trigger? The opportunity actually came from inside India. The incredibly powerful Mughal Empire, which had kept the subcontinent stable for a long time, was starting to decline. As its central power faded, India started to break apart into all these competing regional kingdoms, which created this massive power vacuum. And right into that chaos steps the East India Company. It saw its chance, and it adapted. It stopped being just a bunch of merchants and started acting like a political and military force. It began making alliances, picking sides, backing some rulers against others, and using its own private army to get what it wanted. This slow power grab suddenly explodes in a single defining moment in 1757, the Battle of Plassey. This wasn't just another small battle. This was the event that turned the East India Company from a corporation into a ruler. So the military victory itself was huge, but it's what came after that really matters. The company got control over Bengal, which was one of the richest regions in the entire world at the time. Then, by 1765, it secured the right to collect taxes there, the Diwani. This was the absolute game changer. The company could now use Indian money to pay for its own army and its own government. It basically created a self-funding engine of conquest. And this is where the whole story pivots right back to America. Because the model that the East India Company was building in India, it turned out to be the perfect answer to all the problems Britain had just faced on the other side of the Atlantic. This slide just lays it out so clearly. The American model was all about settlement, sending British people over to create new societies that, well, eventually wanted their own independence. But the Indian model was completely different. It was all about administration and control. Instead of sending settlers, Britain could just rule over a massive existing population, using a smart system of alliances, a whole lot of bureaucracy, and, of course, military power.
Yeah, this quote just nails the new way of thinking. It was more efficient, it was more profitable, and most importantly, it seemed way more secure. By not creating another New England,
Britain figured it could hold on to control without also creating a new nation of fiercely independent people who would eventually want to break away.
But this new model, run by a private company, well, it couldn't last forever. The incredible success of the East India Company actually created a whole new set of problems that were about to cause another huge transformation.
You see, as the company's power grew, so did its problems. We're talking about widespread corruption, total administrative chaos, and a laser focus on profit above all else. This led to terrible famines and a growing anger among the Indian population. The whole system was becoming really, really unstable. And that instability finally just exploded in 1857. The Indian Rebellion was this massive, widespread uprising that shook the very foundations of company rule. And even though it was eventually put down, the message to London was loud and clear. A private company could no longer be trusted to run such a huge and important territory. So, in 1858, the British Crown stepped in and took over, kicking off the era of the British Raj.
Now, with India under direct government control, its role as the centerpiece of the new British Empire was locked in. It wasn't just another colony anymore. It was the absolute core of Britain's global power.
This chart really breaks down exactly why India became the jewel in the crown. And it wasn't just one thing, it was the whole package. It was a massive source of revenue that pretty much paid for the entire empire's administration. Its location was strategically perfect for controlling trade routes to China and the rest of Asia. And this is so key, the manpower from the Indian army became the backbone of British military power, used to project force everywhere from Africa to the Far East.
So what Britain built in India became its new imperial playbook. This was the model: strong administration, backed by military force, a sharp focus on extracting economic value, and using local allies for indirect rule whenever they could. This was the template they'd use across Africa and Asia for the next 100 years.
And that, right there, is the crucial takeaway. That humiliating loss of America didn't destroy the British Empire. Instead, it forced a complete strategic reinvention. It made Britain ditch a failing model of settlement for a much more powerful and long-lasting model of administrative control, with India right at the heart of it all.
You know, this pivot didn't just redefine an empire, its legacy went on to shape the borders, the governments, and the economies of dozens of nations that exist today. And that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. How did this new model of an administrative, military-backed empire end up shaping the modern world that we all live in?